Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 7, text number 143. Krishnera charane hai yadi anurag Krishna binu anyatra thara nahi rahe rag. Krishnera of Krishna, Charane, at the lotus feet, Haya, becomes, Yadi, if, Anurag, attachment, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Binu, without, Anyatra, anywhere else. Tara, his. Nahi, there does not. Rahe, remain. Raga, attachment. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. If one develops his love of Godhead and becomes attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, gradually he loses his attachment to everything else. Please repeat. If one develops his love of Godhead and becomes attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, gradually he loses his attachment to everything else. This is a test of advancement in devotional service. Bhaktir pareshyanu bhavo viraktir anyatra syat. In bhakti, a devotee's only attachment is Krishna. He no longer wants to maintain his attachments to many other things. Although Mayavadi philosophers are supposed to be very advanced on the path of liberation, we see that after some time they descend to politics and philanthropic activities. Many big sannyasis who were supposedly liberated and very advanced have come down again to materialistic activities. Although they left this world as mithya, false. When a devotee develops in devotional service, however, he no longer has attachments to such philanthropic activities. He is simply inspired to serve the Lord, and he engages his entire life in such service. This is the difference between Vaishnava and Mayavadi philosophers. Devotional service, therefore, is practical, whereas Mayavadi philosophy is merely mental speculation. Om Ajnana Timirantasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshush Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, he's forced my eyes open with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Today is the disappearance day of His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. So Garuda asked me to prepare, and following in his footsteps, I saw that to develop the theme of who is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and what is his contribution. What is his contribution to the Krishna consciousness evolution, the Krishna consciousness movement. And this verse and purport leads into that. Even there's one word here, binu. Binu means without. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his birth name was Bimal Prasad. So in the inimitable fashion, that was shortened to Bimal Prasad. And Srila Prabhupada, being his foremost disciple, his disciple who has achieved the desire of his spiritual master to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, as expressed in this purport, one of the major goals of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to give people that anubhav, that pure attachment to Krishna, so that he no longer wants to maintain his attachments to many other things. If you develop love of Godhead, as described here, if one develops his love of Godhead and becomes attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, gradually he loses his attachment to everything else. Not interested in anything else. Attached to Krishna and all that Krishna entails. The devotee's simple. He just wants Krishna. Wants to talk about Krishna, wants to hear about Krishna, wants to taste Krishna Prasad, wants to serve Krishna, wants to know all about Krishna, 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 Krishna. Simple. But how to get to that state, how to achieve that state, has been made possible by the prodigious endeavour of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master. He came to this world as a result of his father's special entreaty to the Lord. His father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was known as the first real reformer in the modern age of Krishna consciousness, of the mood of the time. Krishna consciousness had fallen into in the eyes of the public, a very lesser force. People would see devotees, people would hear devotees, people would disregard devotees, because the predominant presentation of Krishna consciousness was beggars wearing Vaishnava dress and tilak and wandering from door to door and reciting mantras, but really only being interested in receiving some foodstuff. Oh, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So that the people just thought their stomachs are empty and they're desperate, they're calling for some help. And I'm so wonderful, I'm so powerful, I've got a job, I've got money, I can help them, I'm superior to them. The disrepute, fall into disrepute. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, very qualified person. He took employment from the government. He worked his way up from a little teacher to become a district magistrate. This was in British India. The British had come to India and they wanted to control, to take over. They made Calcutta their capital, their headquarters. So in order to take over, they had to subjugate all of the local people. So they had various means, and education was one of those means. they wanted to present the Western culture as being superior. And in order to do that, they had to break down the local people's faith and awareness and respect and involvement in their traditional Vedic culture. So they brought in big scholars, the original Indologists, who examined the culture, examined the philosophy, and then distorted it, tainted it with Christian theology, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant dogma, how that all of the fantastic stories were just myths. Eagles that are so big they fly from planet to planet. They pick up elephants and drop them from a height to crack their skulls, and they eat them. And 12-armed creatures who create, who ride on tigers, and fish, big fish, Timingilla fish, who are so large, floating around and swimming in the ocean that they can swallow whales. So this is all preposterous. Nobody's ever seen it. How can you believe in all these things? And what's far superior is the rational Western worldview, that man is created us in his image, and that we are powerful, and that by our intelligence we can enjoy. We can control everything and we can enjoy. So this was the mood that they were trying to transplant. So they recruited some of the educated local people, and they started to present them with their ideas. So this watered down, this took the focus away from the original faith in the process of devotional service. It wasn't being helped from the side of the devotees, because a lot of the leaders, the gurus, the babajis, they had become depraved. They'd become weak in their practices, become licentious and indulging in sex and intoxication and meat eating. So they weren't giving the real Siddhanta. They were not giving. They, just like nowadays, family, a lot of the grandparents, they're still devout, but they couldn't pass on the essence of that information to their children, so that their grandchildren have got no idea. Why do I have to take out this thread and wrap it around my ear when I go to the bathroom? Why do I have to offer respect? Why do I have to bow down? Why do I have to follow all of these practices? And spiritual life, well, maybe at the end of my life, then when I'm old and I'm broken down, I can't do anything else, then I'll commit myself to cultivating spiritual life. No ideas. So this is the state of the world when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was active, and he observed that it's going to be very difficult to re-establish, to bring back into prominence the original Vedic understanding. The understanding that who is God, who am I, and what is my relationship? What am I supposed to be doing? So he looked around and he thought, well, I can't do it on my own. I need some help. And he started praying. He prayed to his Lord, please send me your son. Please send me a ray of Vishnu. Please send me somebody who is especially empowered. And then in February of 1874, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur appeared. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was living in Jagannath Puri. So this answer to his prayers appeared as a child. When he was born, his umbilical thread was wrapped around his neck and draped across his chest. like a Brahman thread. And the saintly people, they recognize this as a sign of a very exalted personality appearing. So, Rasa, the key is just on that front chair. The appearance of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was auspicious at the beginning, and his goal in life, or his mission in life, had already been established by his father. His father became his spiritual master, his guide, his hero, his role model, and so he was born into a family of pure devotees. And then with that beginning, he was able to develop his natural skills of serving Krishna. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was writing, he was presenting the philosophy, he was dealing with the British, he was maintaining the behaviour of a high-class person. As a judge, as the magistrate, he had to decide on legal matters. So he was exemplary. He did things very, very quickly. He didn't take, like the modern judicial system in India, there are court cases that have been dragging on for 40, 50 years because people are convoluting, distorting the truth and then trying to manipulate the system. Bhaktivinoda Thakur very quickly could decide who was right, who was wrong, and what should be the atonement, what should be the punishment or the benefit, because he was pure-hearted. He was pure-hearted. So he got a lot of respect, and his writings, he was trying to propagate the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, spreading the teachings through his contacts. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, from his birth, was brought up in this environment. His three main contributions to this process, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is known as the original reformer of the world in terms of Krishna consciousness. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his contribution, his three main contributions were his printing presses. He established 5 main printing presses. His printing presses, he dubbed them the Brihat Mridanga. The normal way of spreading Krishna consciousness was to have meetings and to have Harinam Sankirtan. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, adopting the mood of Rupa Goswami in terms of Yukta Vairagya, utilizing everything properly in Krishna's service, not false renunciation, not avoiding using things properly in Krishna's service. So he used the printing press and called it the Brihat Mridanga, the big Mridanga, so that the sound of Krishna's holy name would be heard at a great distance. A book can travel on the other side of the world. It can bring that information. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote books, and some of his books travelled to different universities. He had a program to send them out to different places. The devotees Bhaktivinoda Thakur, 1896, he sent the books then. So in the late 60s or the 70s, they went to the universities and they found in McGill University a copy of one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books, Lord Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts, a little English writing about the life of Lord Chaitanya. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he systematized, he got the printing presses, the Brihat Mridanga, so that he could print in large quantity many books. many books about Krishna, many books about, and he printed a lot of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books. And the major books that he was writing were commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam, commentaries on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, commentaries on the Bhaktisiddhanta, because these were the cornerstones of that pure Krishna consciousness which he is trying to imbibe back into the society. The phrase that can encapsulate the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is Pran Ache Tanarse Hetu Prachar. One who has life can preach. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, from a very early age, about the age of 7, he had memorized the whole Bhagavad Gita, the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And when he had reached the end of his high school education, he entered the Sanskrit College in Calcutta. In 1892, he lasted 3 years in college. And then his father, who was very respected and well placed amongst the government and in society, he got him a job as a librarian in the libraries of different kings. The king of Tripura, the king of Tripura, he became the librarian, and he'd had jobs like that for 10 years. So if anybody's worked in the library, there's a lot of books around. So in between fulfilling his obligations, he would read. And he had an amazing skill. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was known as a Shruti-dara. Shruti, hearing, and Dara, I'm not sure what that exactly means, but Shruti-dara means he could remember. He had photographic memory. He could speed read. So he read whole libraries, read and digested whole libraries. He became known as a walking encyclopedia. He could speak in great depth on any subject, and having that foundation, having the employment in the library, helped him to do that. So he became very learned. He became very conscious, very aware of the art of Jyotish, the art of astrology, astronomy. And so he was able to penetrate into the mysteries of that science and present very profound treatises on astrology. And for that he was given a special title. Do you remember the title? Siddhanta Saraswati. Siddhanta Saraswati. So he was very early on recognised that. He was born and he was given the name Bimal Prasad. Bimal Prasad. Bimal. And that Bimal Prasad means Prasadam of Bimala Devi, who is related to Krishna. So Siddhanta Saraswati. Then after some time, he had been trained by a spiritual master, he'd been exposed to the Krishna conscious culture. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur understood that he should approach another Vaishnava to get further initiation. His father gave him Harinam initiation. That was in 1881, when he was 7 years old. Initiated by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur into worship of a Kurma Shila, the recitation of a Nrsinga mantra, and chanting the Mahamantra on beads. Altogether, this was signifying his formal entry into Vaishnavism at 7 years old. So, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur considered that he needed a little bit more support, a little bit more grooming. Srila Prabhupada, he appeared by great fortune in a family of pure devotees, and his father, he acknowledges in his writings how he was trained by his father. He was given everything by his father in terms of Vaishnava culture. But then he met his spiritual master who put the icing on the cake, who gave him the tips about how to preach. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he made a comment that once he met his spiritual master is Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji. I'll just read the section about his appreciation of Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji. And he commented, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he had all this book learning, and it was book learning. It was in his eye it was dry, or compared to real life it was dry. One who has life, he can preach. And once he met his spiritual master and he saw a living example of somebody exhibiting the behavior of a devotee, that changed his life, that revolutionized his life. Performing bhajan for almost 30 years in Braj Mandal, Srila Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj arrived in Navadvip Dham, eager for darshan of the deities of Sri Sri Gaura Vishnu Priya at the newly revealed birth site of Lord Chaitanya. Babaji Maharaj was a bhajananandi, preferring to live in a holy place to concentrate on chanting rather than going out into the world to establish temples and recruit followers. As Shakshat Vairagya Murti, renunciation personified, he rejected bodily comforts and made little effort to shelter or maintain his body. He ate raw earth, uncooked rice, and other items generally considered inedible. One of his meals was to have barley cooked in cow's urine, and he would eat it from a skull, half a skull. He shunned company, had no patience with pretenders posing as devotees, and ignored those who approached him. He cared not for any residence. In Navadvip, he lived for some time under a detachable wicker awning of a country boat, and for several months in a latrine. His possessions were practically nil. Sometimes he donned cloth taken from dead bodies at the burning gut, and at other times went naked. He had no interest apart from chanting the holy names continuously and associating with the few devotees he recognized as genuine. Toward the end of 1898, at Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's newly constructed house in Swananda Shukada Kunj, Sri Siddhanta Saraswati had his first darshan of Babaji Maharaj, who arrived there wearing a tiger skin cap and carrying a basket containing puja paraphernalia, both of which had been given to him by the famed Sri Bhagavan Das Babaji of Kalna. Sri Siddhanta Saraswati became deeply struck upon hearing Babaji Maharaj recite a song articulating Srila Raghunath Das Goswami's feelings for Srimati Radharani. He wrote down those esoteric verses and ensouled them as the essence of his own internal bhajan. Sometime later, Babaji Maharaj presented Sri Siddhanta Saraswati with that hat and basket of paraphernalia, as well as 4 or 5 pieces of knotted string for counting japa and a tilak stamp with the initials Ha and Kr, meaning Hare Krishna. Although practically worthless materially, these gifts were spiritually invaluable, having been given by a Paramahamsa. Although many reputed gurus were desirous to count Sri Siddhanta Saraswati as their own, he detected their insincerity, spurned their wooing, and stood opposed to them. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had been his Shiksha Guru for birth and had given him Harinam and mantras, yet so that Sri Siddhanta Saraswati could attain additional spiritual shelter, guidance and inspiration for his future colossal service, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent him to Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji for further initiation. Sri Siddhanta Saraswati was decidedly aristocratic, intellectual, and of exemplary virtuous deportment, whereas by external consideration Babaji Maharaj was illiterate, cranky, and crude. Indeed, he was reputed to vehemently refuse persons who approached him for diksha, even sometimes beating them with an umbrella. Predictably, he also declined to induct this would-be disciple, caring not a whit for his apparent good qualities, which shook Sri Siddhanta Saraswati, accustomed as he was to being respected. Babaji Maharaj told him, "I once accepted a disciple, but he cheated me and went away. I will not take any further disciples." But Sri Siddhanta Saraswati was not easily discouraged and again begged for mercy. Babaji Maharaj responded, "I will ask Mahaprabhu. If he gives permission, your request will be granted." When after a few days, Sri Siddhanta Saraswati returned and inquired, what was Mahaprabhu's order? Babaji Maharaj replied, "I forgot to ask." And when Sri Siddhanta Saraswati came for the third time, he was directly refused. "I asked," Babaji Maharaj said, "but I did not receive the command of Mahaprabhu." Sri Siddhanta Saraswati was devastated. He stood up and uttered, "Karuna na hoile kandiya kandiya prana na rakibo ara." "Without your mercy, weeping and weeping, I will no longer sustain my life." Sri Siddhanta Saraswati resolved that however many times he might be refused, no further would he rotate in the world without gaining Babaji Maharaj's grace. Seeing this young aspirant's genuine desire and commitment, Babaji Maharaj relented. He told Sri Siddhanta Saraswati to bathe in the nearby Saraswati, a tributary of the Ganga, and then return, after which he accepted him as a disciple. This was in January 1900. Sri Siddhanta Saraswati later reflected on this incident. When out of false ego I was thinking, I'm a great scholar of mathematics and philosophy. Let any big pundit come at any time, day or night, and I will cut his propositions to pieces. At that time I got the darshan of the lotus feet of Gurudev. He ignored everything that was previously appreciated in me, my truthfulness, my moral and pious life, and my intellectualism, knowing them to be of little value. When I saw that he ignored whatever was good in me, I realized how good he himself must be, who could neglect so many good qualities in me. What inconceivable wealth he possessed. Being neglected by him, I understood that there was no one more fallen and contemptible than myself. That was my actual identity. The very things that I adjudged desiderata, such as scholarship and upright character, this exalted soul regarded as valueless. I apprehended that within himself this noble personality possessed priceless treasure. I then pondered that either he is extremely puffed up or is exceedingly merciful. I then haughtily said to my Gurudev, "You're a worshipper of that cheetah and debauch, Krishna. So why would you be compassionate to someone like me, dedicated to ordinary morality?" Humbly and sincerely, I prayed to the Supreme Lord for His mercy. Later, by His grace, I recognized that without receiving the blessings of this peerless saint, and without serving him, nothing good could happen to me. When I accepted that and acted accordingly, and then received the causeless, unlimited grace of my Sri Gurudev and refuge at his lotus feet, I deemed my life fulfilled. I had considered my Gurudev to be unequalled in vairagya, but somewhat short of learning. But he reduced to powder my audacity born of book learning. With the mallet of his mercy, he revealed that whatever I had judged to be the highest ideal was in fact most low and despicable. When by his grace that instruction first entered my ears, my diminutive brain lacked the capacity to accommodate such transcendental knowledge. But to all fools like me, he gave the chance to hear such lofty topics. I have understood that if the people of this world do not receive the same jolt that I received from my Gurudev, then their consciousness will not awaken. Therefore I'm telling everyone, I am more foolish than anyone else on earth. Please, all of you, do not be foolish like me. Do not live your life within the limitation of calculating consciousness. Discuss Vaikuntha Katha and you will become a great person. I am telling you what I have realized to be supremely beneficial. Although Babaji Maharaj always strictly forbade everyone to touch his feet, once he voluntarily placed them on Sri Saraswati, Siddhanta Saraswati's head and ordered him, preach the absolute truth, keeping aside all other activities, thus confirming his disciples' life's mission. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because of his preparation, his audacity and his learning, he was well grounded, well broadly established in expressing knowledge in these terms. So he appealed to the intelligentsia of the time, the British and also those locals who had become the new elite. They took on different moods, trying to meld together the traditional Vedic culture and make it more attainable to the Westerners. But in the process, they had just watered it down. There's one statement that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was extremely practical and very pragmatic. He used Yukta Vairagya principle. So he was able to maintain strictly the Vaishnava principles. He had incredible discipline and austerity, but at the same time he was able to make those teachings relevant and appealing to the people of the modern times. He didn't create a barrier. He was presenting more the oneness rather than, but still he was doing that in such a very powerful way that he became known as the line guru. And his technique was a chopping technique. He had the Srimad Bhagavatam in one hand and a club in the other hand. He was compared to his comparison, and it's necessary, he performed such a task because he could observe that Vaishnavism had sunk into the hands of or in between the sahajas, those who took it very cheaply, and the smarters who follow rules and regulations very formally, very dryly. So he came in and he split them apart. He divided them. He presented a truth that was apparently new, but he didn't consider it reforming. He considered it re-establishing the initial purity or the original purity of the Sudha Bhakti. So he took he was battling against the tendency of the sahajas who take things very cheaply to dissipate, to break it down. And the formalism of the smarters, that no, it's got to be very strict. He cut a path through the middle of them. And as a social reformer, he was noted that most gurus would just try and mamby-pamby around a bit and just adjust a few principles. Whereas as a real social reformer, he came with a sword to cut apart all of the misconceptions, the crazy ideas that people were living their life by, and to re-establish the original pristine truths of Sudha Bhakti. And he was effective, just as Lord Chaitanya was effective. Lord Chaitanya was going against the times. He was engaging everybody in devotional service. He was effective. He was able to discourse with people who were criticizing him, and he would establish from the scriptures that all this it's based on the standard presentation. It's not something new. And the evidence that he was effective is that in his lifetime he was recognized. There were many people who were antagonistic towards him. He disregarded them. He said it's just like spitting up in the sky. They're just making all this noise. They're spitting up in the sky. The only result of their spitting will be come back and fall on their face. And another statement was, the dogs may bark, but the caravan will continue. It just keeps on moving. He disregarded, and he was firm and fixed in his presentation. Very, very powerful. Siddhanta Saraswati. He understood. He was known as a Sahagrahi Vaishnava. One who understood or who could extract the essence, the real value of things. So he would examine, he would turn the torchlight of his intellect, his wisdom, to all of the different traditions, and he would discern the false logic that they were using. And he would smash people. He was very good at debate. He would meet with people, and he was very good at debate. He was very powerful. He was awesome in his presentation, and he got a reputation. He would be walking down the street and he'd see somebody who was committed to the Mayavad philosophy, and he'd go out of his way to walk across the street and meet them and shake them and just take away their platform of confidence. Why do you claim that the absolute truth is impersonal? How can you believe this? How can you? And he would then help them to establish the higher truths of pure devotional service. So Sahagrahi, he was able to extract the essence, the essential things. And then one other statement was that he took that essence, that elixir of transcendental knowledge, of pure love of Godhead, and he repackaged it. He was very he was famous for his printing presses. He was famous for his parikrams. His spiritual master recognized the value of the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya as Mayapur, and he told him, develop Sri Mayapur. So he developed the parikrams in very amazing fashions. The parikrams, even nowadays, they've got 4,000 to 8,000 people going out for 7 days, travelling by foot, or if they can't, then they get bussed out there and back again, and they go and they camp out and they hear Krishna Katha in the sites where Lord Chaitanya's pastimes took place. And every morning, we were there one morning, and it just dawned on me that we're getting up every morning at 6 o'clock, we're starting to walk to the next place, and the sound system's there, and the leader of the kirtan, he starts singing the songs in Bengali. So the local villagers, they come out of respect to see the kirtan, and they stand there as the kirtan party goes past. Normally the kirtan's here and gone, but the kirtan with 2,000 people, it takes like 20 minutes to go past. So they hear the whole songs of the acharyas. Jiv jago, Gaura Chandra bole, Kota nidra jao maya pisachira kole, Wake up, sleeping souls. Wake up, sleeping souls. 6 o'clock in the morning and they're all bleary-eyed. Wake up, sleeping souls. You've been sleeping in the lap of the witch called Maya. You've been pampering your body. But I've come and brought the medicine, the holy name, so that you can actually awaken to your true initial spiritual self. So he was preaching like that, and then in the established the parikramas and all of the different places they've been renovated. Some of the places were in disrepair. Even recently we would go to the house of Kolavecha Sridhar, and it looked like a barbecue pit. It was just a brick structure with all rubbish thrown in it. So they slowly renovated those things, and he renovated those things by discussing what happened here. What was the importance of such a place? Kolavecha Sridhar. Lord Chaitanya would come there and get refreshment. After the kirtan, he'd come and sit. Poor brahmana, poor devotee, didn't have enough money to put together to get a dhoti which wasn't full of holes. But Lord Chaitanya would come there and drink from his cup, which was just a cracked old iron pot. So hearing the glories of the devotees, that would help to re-establish the value of these places of pilgrimage. And look after the devotees and make sure that they had opportunity here. Radhanath Swami, he's taken that, visiting the holy places, to another level. He takes 4,000 to 5,000 people, and they sit in one place around. I visited them at Advaita Bhavan. It was a pitch black night, and they were sitting around. They had all lights, and every 20 or so meters there was a loudspeaker, and everybody could hear. Everybody could be absorbed in a 4-hour discourse on the glories of Advaita Acharya. So developed the Dham, make it more accessible, appreciate what's happening in the Dham, parikrams. And then another one of his limbs of preaching was the dioramas, the theistic exhibits, where the sculptors would fashion murtis, little dolls. We had some of those when we were doing the Mind, Body and Soul festival, where all of the spiritual people were coming. There was a lot of 90% on the body, about 8% on the mind, and a few people who had some understanding of the spirit. So we had at the front of our stall, we had a diorama, one of those theistic displays of changing bodies, from the baby in the womb, different figures representing the different stages of life, and then at the end of life going into another body. And also another one of karma, the bull tied down with a man with a big chopper about to slaughter him. But on this particular exhibit, the bull had a man's face and the man had a bull's head. So people would come and they would look at it, they would see it first off, but then it would catch their attention, they would get a second glimpse, and it would shock them. So they had very profound effects, these dioramas, and they displayed just visually, in a cultural way, the pastimes, the philosophy, the mood of serving Krishna. One of the original theistic displays, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was able to set up in 19... Where is it? 1930, February, March 1930, presented a massive diorama exhibition in Mayapur. It extended for a mile's radius. It's like a Bengali Disneyland. You walk in there and there's an exhibit, and around the corner and all the distorted mirrors and different things like that. But it's all about Krishna's pastimes, Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And again, that was in March 1930. Then again, that was presented in September 1931. So that's about 18 months later, this time in Calcutta. So it takes time to develop those things, for the artists to fashion them, to make the models. It's a very amazing art. If you go to the villages, you can see where they're fashioning the murtis, which come out for any of the big festivals, the Durga Puja, the different pujas. They're made from straw, covered with clay, and then baked, and then painted. So these dioramas, they're very powerful, very powerful. So this was one of the limbs of the mission of Siddhanta Saraswati, to preach through these means, and very effective, had a profound effect on people. He as a guru, as an exemplary guru, he was not just seeking for vain followers, for weak followers. He came to implant into people's hearts the process for developing pure love of God. And as a reformer, the previous method that people could take to, they observed Vaishnavas and Babajis, so they tried to imitate the Babaji. They put on the dress, some people put on the dress like Gorkashodas Babaji. But because they couldn't maintain, they didn't have it inside, there was no life, there was no depth to who they were, then they just became involved in hypocrisy. And then they then turned to the sense gratification path. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he carved a path which was practical, tangible. People could make regular spiritual advancement, and they could develop anartha nivritti. They could become free from all the anarthas, all of the problems that were plaguing them from living in the material world, and develop pure devotional service, develop all these saintly qualities. A true reformer, the ray of Vishnu, the prayed-for son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and without him, then we wouldn't have what we've got here. Srila Prabhupada, he presented and Krishna consciousness, and he would never claim any credit for himself. He said always that all I've done is presented what my spiritual master taught me without changing even a letter. He learned everything from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then, just like it's described, the presentation of the Srimad Bhagavatam by Sukadev Goswami, he's made it sweeter. He's made the presentation sweeter. He's made it more tangible, more accessible to people in the Western countries. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was trying to stamp out the digressions from Krishna consciousness. But unfortunately, they've survived, and they're taking root in the West. The attraction for the sentiment of Krishna's pastimes with the gopis and different Gauranga Nagari, different aberrations like that. When you're in India, you're travelling on the train, and part of the entertainment is there's a man dressed as a lady, big beard and bangles and like that, and he'll sit on your lap and taunt you until you give him some money. So this is something that's taken from this the mood of the people who are trying to imitate the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, one of his goals was to try and discredit these things and give people a genuine taste for what is real spiritual life. Following in his example, he established the Gaudiya Mat, and if we see and we look at the Gaudiya Mat nowadays, it's not what he was envisaging necessarily. It's changed. He wrote, "What is the Gaudiya Mat? Srila Gaudiya Mat is the primary trunk of the great Kalyana Kalpataru, desire tree of auspiciousness. The imperial court that propagates the independent sovereignty wherein resides in his own form Sri Krishna, the transcendental tattva, superior even to that considered best. Gaudiya Mat is the charitable hospital of non-malefic mercy administered by the best of doctors, the genuine guru, along with the highly effective medicine of Krishna Nam and the complete diet of Mahaprasad. Gaudiya Mat is the grand temple of knowledge, received by the descending system of Guru Parampara and pertaining to the Supreme Lord who is beyond mundane sense perception. Gaudiya Mat is demonstrating the harmony of the Pancharatrika and Bhagavat paths. The unparalleled instructor of Seva to the Dham, Nam and Kam of fully independent Lord, Vrajendra Nandana. The eastern mountain wherefrom the sun is seen to rise and wherefrom emit Sri Sajjana Toshani, Gaudiya and Nadia Prakash, bearers of news from the spiritual world. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati taught with his 5 presses. He established many periodicals, monthly, fortnightly, weekly, and in Calcutta he had a daily newspaper of the news from the spiritual world. Gaudiya Mat, in a world inundated with Agya Rudi, the sacred place of the descent of the Vivada Rudi of worlds. Sri Gaudiya Mat, the abode of service to the 5 best methods of bhakti, which totally cleanse the effects of the 5 abodes of Kali: meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, and gold hoarding. Gaudiya Mat, the temple resounding with the tumult of Krishna Nam within a world resounding with the tumult of quarrel of this talkative age, Kali Yuga. Gaudiya Mat, the educational institution imparting knowledge of Krishna, Krishna Bhakti and Krishna Prem in the divisions of Sambandha, Avideya and Prayojana. A Vedic research library